Hey, you're back. That must mean you want to talk about some records. I got a great one right here, picked out already. Big fave of mine. Let's talk a few minutes about this charmer. Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. One of the greatest live albums ever, if not the best live album ever. Must have. Tons of critics list. In the book, 1001 Records You Must Hear Before You Die. When this record was released in 1978, the NME said it was the greatest live album they ever heard. Let's talk a little bit about this record, some of the funky things about it, but let me start by talking about what this record means to me and how I became a Lizzy fanatic. Back in 1978, in the old days when you would stay up late to see rock and roll TV, I stayed up late on a Friday or Saturday night with my older brother to watch Don Kirshner's rock concert. Neither of us had any idea who was going to be on, but it just so happens Thin Lizzy was on that night. And me being a 13-year-old kid at that time, I saw Thin Lizzy do the cowboy song. I was blown away. I was floored. I asked my older brother, who are these guys? Do you know these guys? What's the story? He told me what he knew about them and blah, blah, blah. From that moment on, I was like, I got to get into these guys. Now, fast forward, I'm at the mall with my mom. Remember, I'm a young kid, young teenager at this time, still relying on mom. We're at the mall. It's St. Patty's Day. I wanted to get a Thin Lizzy record. So I asked my mom, hey, I'm going to go look at records in the record shop. Okay, son, go on, check it out. So I go in the record shop. I go in there. Just coincidentally, like I said, it was St. Patty's Day, and we all know that Thin Lizzy, Phil Lynott, Irish, didn't put two and two together at the time, but looking back, it's kind of funny that this was on St. Patrick's Day. But anyway, they're having a St. Patrick's Day sale, and there's a sign in the record store, 20% off all records that have any green on them. I'm looking at Thin Lizzy, and I want this record because I had seen Thin Lizzy on a midnight special with my older brother doing the cowboy song, which is on this album, and it's awesome, by the way. So I'm looking at this record. There doesn't seem to be any green. I'm determined. I got this little picture on the back, and I'm staring at this record, and I'm just like, man, there's got to be some green on here somewhere. There's got to be some green. Sure enough, when I saw the green, boom, I was thrilled. If you take a close look here, inside Brian Downey's drums, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, right there. Because of the lighting coming down on that towel in Brian Downey's drums, I was like, yes! I grabbed the record, went up to the counter, gave it to the guy, and he's like, where's the green on here, man? Where's the green? I flipped the record over and I pointed at Mr. Downey's drums. I said, right there, champ, there's the green. Boom, scored. Mom bought me the record, 20% off. Started my love affair with Thin Lizzy. One of the all-time great live albums. I mean, there's Get Your Ya-Ya's Out, The Who Live at Leeds, Stones' Brussels Affair, again there. Frampton Comes Alive, can you say that? Why was Peter Frampton an influence on this record? I'm going to tell you why. But anyway, this came out in 78. Got to number 2 in the charts, and it actually stayed in the charts for over a year. Couldn't get to number 1 because of the soundtrack to Grease. What? Yeah, really. If you have a choice between this and Grease, I know what I'm choosing. Anyway, Thin Lizzy had had a couple hits at that point. They had 2 top 10 albums, and they had had 2 top 10 hits. Of course, they got bigger on the worldwide rock and roll stage in 75 with Jailbreak. 76, they put out Johnny the Fox. Now, they're on the road touring Johnny the Fox in the United States. And every time they turn on the radio, they're hearing Peter Frampton. Frampton is having a huge hit with Frampton Comes Alive. So they're in the car going to a gig or in the hotel one night after the gig, and they're listening and Show Me the Way comes on. And Phil Lynott gets frustrated, and he's like, oh my gosh. And the crowd is just going crazy when they're listening to this song, and Phil's like, what what is this guy doing? Is he doing somersaults or what? Why is that crowd going crazy? And then they're listening a little bit of the song, and then he looks at the other guys and he says, we can do this, and we can do this better. Little did he know that's what would happen. So, this is how it all came together. Phil had wanted to have a great snapshot of Thin Lizzy at their height when they were really just great. And funnily enough, the other guitar player, Brian Robertson, said he wanted Thin Lizzy to do a live album like his all-time favorite live album, which was Humble Pie Rockin' the Fillmore. That's another Frampton reference there. Anyway, they had wanted to go now, after doing their 76 tour, they had wanted to go in the studio to do, let me back that up. They did the 76 tour. In 77, they put out Bad Reputation. And they asked Bowie and the T-Rex producer, everybody knows, Tony Visconti, to produce that record. So Tony did it. They had some more big hits. Now, they're out on the road in 77. And they actually did some tours with Queen at that time. So they come back off the road and they're ready to start again. And they're like, all right, man. They go to Tony and they say, hey, dude, you did such a great job on our last album. Will you do a new album for us? And Tony says, hey, take it easy there, kids. I can't. Me and David are recording his new album. I don't have any time for you guys. But Phil went back to Tony and he said, Tony, please, give me 2 weeks. Can you give me 2 weeks? We just came off these great tours. How about if I bring you some live tapes and maybe we can put together a live album? Because remember, Phil said he wanted a great snapshot of the band, and Brian Robertson did too. And remember, at this time in the 70s, that was a big deal to have a really great live album. So anyway, Thin Lizzy thought, well, this is our move to maybe capture lightning in a bottle. So they took the tapes to Visconti because he said, sure, I'll give you 2 weeks. And Visconti, they managed to work magic, I guess, for lack of a better word. Visconti couldn't go in the studio to help Thin Lizzy record a new album, but he was able to combine from all these tapes this masterpiece. Now, a few things about this. I told you, when it came out, it got to number 2 in the charts, kept off because of Grease. Couple weird things, though. There was a lot of controversy about this record. Because at the time, or maybe it was a few years afterwards, Visconti in some interview had said that 75% of this album was actually done in the studio. And only 25% of it was live. But Thin Lizzy's manager counteracted that and said, no, he's talking rubbish. It's 75% live with 25% overdubs. Now, Visconti did admit he got tapes of different sizes, different gigs, this, that, and the other, to try to keep everything the same and have a continual sound and performance all the way through was nearly impossible with all these different tapes and different sources. So there would have to be some studio, polishing going on. But for years and years, since 78, like I said, this was assumed. Was it mostly studio trickery? Did Phil Lynott go into a studio and actually re-record everything? Was it just some overdubs? No one knew until just a couple years ago when they put out the massive 8 CD box set of these. Now, I forgot to mention, sorry about that, because this is key. This album was put together mainly from 3 shows. And those 3 shows was a 76 show when Thin Lizzy was winding up the Johnny the Fox tour at the Hammersmith Odeon. And it's rumored some of the Sex Pistols were there that night at the after party. Punks like their rock and roll. And then the other 2 gigs was the Philadelphia Tower Theater show from 77. I'm not sure if that was when they were still touring with Queen or if they were doing their own headlining shows then at that point. But it was taken from that Philadelphia show and I believe some shows in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, Visconti took those 3 shows and put them together. Fast forward to this mega box set that came out. That box set has the complete show from, I think, 5, 6 7 shows. I don't know. You can hear the complete Philadelphia show, the Toronto show, the Hammersmith shows, and then another London show. But it is crazy because that puts the myth to rest. The point being, you listen to that mega box set of those shows, and you listen to the shows that this was mainly culled from, the Philadelphia, the Hammersmith, and Toronto show. And plain and simple, Thin Lizzy kicked ass. Kicked ass. If there was any studio trickery, okay, maybe it's a little more treble here, a little bit, let's just shine that a bit. But it was not, as it was rumored, for years and years and years. These guys managed to pull off what Phil had wanted, probably the whole band wanted. Scott Gorham said, when this came out, those tours, I guess as they finished up the 77 tour, was Thin Lizzy at their tops. And if you wanted to have Thin Lizzy at the top, this was it, because shortly thereafter, dope would set in. Then things would get messy. For those who are keeping track, a few other weird things. Well, let me just point out, this is actually the only Thin Lizzy album with Are You Ready? Are you ready? Are you ready to rock? Are you ready to rip it up? Awesome, awesome track. Cowboy song on here, Dancing in the Moonlight, Still in Love with You, Jailbreak. What do you want? It's all on here. In fact, for the longest time, I believe it was until the 90s, this was kind of the de facto greatest hits album. That if you wanted all the best of Thin Lizzy, when they were just walking it like they talk it, this was the album. So for a long time, this was how you got the best of Thin Lizzy. And it is just simply a fantastic snapshot. It's a must-have. In fact, if you don't have this record in your collection, something's really wrong with you. Anyway, a few little points. Let's talk a few little odd bits about this. Another reason why I love this album, aside from the fact it's my favorite Thin Lizzy album, this cover, this iconic cover, everybody knows this cover with Phil on his knees, just letting it go. We got Brian Robertson there. We got Scott over here. You can't see Brian in the background, but classic kick-ass rock and roll album cover. Was taken in Texas. Great. This was actually taken the day after my birthday in 1977, October 11th, in San Antonio, Texas. So that's another great reason why this is such a great record. Now, Thin Lizzy wanted to go with this stencil logo here. Phil actually didn't want this because he said it focused too much on him, that they were actually a band. But the rest of the band managed to convince him that this nice photo taken by Chalky Davies, was the one, and they made the right choice on that. But they went with the same kind of stencil lettering that they had just done with Bad Reputation because it gave them an edge. It was rock and roll, and funnily enough, that's what you use on road cases when you're moving equipment around, when you're on tour. So it's a good combo here. They only have one little picture on the back. Did I mention this record also has Huey Lewis on it, believe it or not. Before the news and whatever, this was Huey Lewis. He shows up on here as bluesy Huey Lewis, who plays harmonica. I think he plays it on Baby Drives Me Crazy. I don't recall off the top of my head. But I have to say, this album's pretty great, except for that song, Baby Drives Me Crazy. Stupid song, the worst song on the album, but thank God it's only one song, about 3, 4, 5 minutes long, so it's not going to interfere with everything. Why they put that on this record, I don't know. Because when you listen to the box set, you had better choices of stuff to put on. Let's get back to this cover. Funnily enough, it was basically 3 gigs I told you. The Hammersmith gig, the Philadelphia Tower Theater gig, and the Toronto gig. Visconti put together 17 tracks from those 3 shows to make this album. Thin Lizzy's co-manager at the time when they were putting this together, they had a great cover. What do we do with the rest of the record? Well, there's 17 songs on here. Brilliant idea. Their co-manager said, why don't we, in the gatefold, put 17 pictures so that as you listen to each song, you can sit and stare at a different picture. That's like what we used to do in the old days, kids. We would sit there and put a record on, and you would sit for hours and just look and stare at the pictures and read all the print on the albums. So we have, the manager got the idea because he had gone to a piano recital and he saw a nerd in the audience, like with the piece of music, checking to see if the guy playing the piano was playing along with the music properly as he should. Brilliant idea. So they applied it here, put 17 pictures. You have 3 rows with an even number of pictures. The math doesn't add up. Why is that? Because there's actually 18 pictures here. Because Phil insisted to put this one picture in. And if you look closely, has nothing to do with all these other rock and roll pics with like lights and smoke and stuff blowing up and hard rocking going on. Why is that? And I have to tell you, when I was a kid with this album, I looked at these pictures. One of these things does not belong. And I would always stare at this picture and go, what the heck is that? Why is that picture there? It makes no sense. If you look closely, there's a straw, there's a razor blade, there's a rolled up, come on. Phil had to put in his picture, which turned the 17 into 18, which gave us 3 even rows of 6, had to put his homage in to drugs and dope. Remember, I told you, Scott said this was Lizzy before it all started to fall apart. And looking back, sadly, you see there, would end up killing Phil in the long run, the dope. But anyway, like I said, great album, one of the greatest ever. All the critics polls, anybody who's ever heard this record says it's a great one. If you're a rock and roll fan, you need to have this record in your collection. For the longest time, served as Thin Lizzy's greatest hits, or a Thin Lizzy's greatest hits package, up until the 90s, I think, when they released Dedication, which was the first official, I think, Thin Lizzy greatest hits, best of, whatever you want to say. Fantastic record. The last record with Brian Robertson. The only record where you get Are You Ready on it. And just, I will tell you something real quick. On the back, you see here again, Scott. And in some of the pictures inside, there's Scott, of course, rocking out, looking good, doing his thing, like here, like that. I remember looking at that picture all the time when I was a kid, thinking like, wow, that dude is so rock and roll. Look at, there's Scott there. He's wearing his little red outfit. Scott admitted to some of the studio trickery that Visconti had done on this. When you listen to the fantastic version of Still in Love with You on here, which is 9 minutes long, great guitar work going on. Scott was wearing his famous red outfit with his long flowing hair, and he had gone up to the front of the stage, to play to the ladies, the little rock and roll ladies there, maybe a little bit of, who knows what you get after the show, you know what I'm saying? So he's down there just giving it some, slinging that hair around, whatever. And as he's like noodling on, some of the ladies down front start grabbing his flares and they're like rubbing his legs and whatever. Scott's living in the moment, man. He's like digging it. He's doing a solo, appreciating the fact he's getting a little bit of extra love from the ladies down front. Here's his cue. Oh man, I got to get back to my pedal there, like turn off my flanger or whatever it was. Guess what? He couldn't get away because the ladies were holding on to his flares. So by the time he got back to his pedals, as he's moving across stage, he hit a couple bum notes there at the end of the solo or in the track towards the end, I think it is. And they were never able to gloss that up in the studio. So they tried, but that's one of those little rock and roll tales that, what do you want to say? A live moment is caught forever on here, all due to red flares and whatever you want to say, getting a little extra love from the ladies. Anyway, a few little tidbits about Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous. I will say, I think it's a great album. I think it's like almost, if not the last will and testament, or last great testament of a time, if you think about it, in the 70s, when a double live album was an important thing. And it really was a chance to show a band who could walk it like they talk it, and make the most of a tour to be able to let the people see the full energy of how the band really was. And this was a great snapshot of just how great Thin Lizzy was. Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. We'll never get live albums like this again, kids. No matter how hard MTV tried with Unplugged. Anyway, Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. Is it the greatest live album ever? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Keep on rocking.